Here's a 2018 STI intercooler next to a 2002 WRX intercooler. These appear to have the same hose set up underneath, so I'm having my fingers crossed that we can make this work. These are turbo inlets. One is a brand new AVO silicone piece and the other is the factory, now brittle plastic. This job sucks to do. The first thing we need to do is get the factory intercooler out of here. Just remove everything that seems to be attached to it, 2 bolts on the sides, undo the bypass valve, and take off what is probably cracking vent hoses if you still have the factory ones. Then it's time to yank that thing out of there. Just look at that size comparison between the two. This is just going to cool so much nicer. If I flip that, looking at this, maybe 20% bigger than the factory WRX one. It does look like dimensionally though, if this doesn't suit or fit, then we are able to swap on the stock one. A quick test fit of the intercooler gave me just enough confidence that we can make this work, and now we can start pulling off the old intake. We're also taking off the intercooler bracket. This will need to be modified so we can make it fit. The other side looked like it lined up, so we don't need to touch that one. Then the air filter can come out, all vac and breather hoses come off, and a lot of these are going to get replaced. A couple of the wiring connectors need to get undone just to give it a little bit more wiggle room, and you need to break the inlet a little bit, otherwise it won't come out. You also need to remove your power steering line. The turbo inlet would have been put on in the factory without the manifold on, but I'm not taking the manifold off to try and save this piece. It's going in the bin anyway, so see you later to this port. That is the bonus of the AVO one, is we don't worry about that inlet on top there. It's just the blow-off valve, which makes life putting it back in significantly easier. So just look at the difference in these two. This is much wider, it's going to flow much more better air, and it sort of bottlenecks on this little bend here, whereas this stays the same shape. That does make this a lot more annoying to put back in, but it means in the long run we're going to have a much better airflow going around this whole thing compared to I don't know where that's gone. So apparently a little bit of dish soap around on this helps this slide in just a little bit easier. So I'm gonna give that a go. I've taken all the plastic pieces off and the clamps and the blow-off valve, port, vent, whatever you want to call it, just to give this as much chance as I can of getting in nicely. There we go. Here's the part that sucks. Getting it onto the turbo. Come on. Come on. Come on. Oh yeah. Get in there. Woo. Sick. And just like that, without any dramas. After a little bit of a fight, the new inlet is now on the turbo. It's time for the struggle of getting our BPV port back in. And here's where not having a cameraman has its downfall, as I had no idea what this camera was pointing at. Now we have to start doing things in reverse, putting the power steering back on. I'd recommend getting some fresh crush washers for it, that way it doesn't leak. And don't forget to drop the bolt into the engine. Oh, you. Oh my days. As that is a key step to this process. The AVO inlet also comes with a new hose as it relocates the vent tube. I decided to also replace some of the smaller vacuum hoses around the area, and then found out my current intake setup doesn't actually fit The Mishimoto pipe is too small for the diameter of the turbo inlet, and the filter is way too long. Thankfully I had a spare filter and adapter that does fit. I've also been told this turbo inlet does mount up to a factory airbox if you need to run that for certain laws in your country, but I would recommend you do your own research to make sure it does fit. Now it's time to start with this intercooler. Another test fit shows it gets really close to a port on the turbo, so you need to keep that in mind when you're making up a bracket. All I did was get a piece of metal that bolts up to the factory mount from underneath so there's no bolt head protruding on the intercooler side, and cutting the excess thread off so it sits flush. A little piece cut out from some old pool fencing then makes up a nice little spacer to try sit that intercooler up from the turbo. A quick hit of paint to pretty it up and we're good to test fit again.
Hopefully this is the last time, for today at least, that I need to be doing this.
So it's all looking very good, but my bracket, although the height is spot on, it doesn't quite line up with the intercooler mount. But that is a tomorrow issue. Tomorrow has arrived and I need to take out this broken breather hose. I'm on a bit of a time crunch, so ordering a factory one wasn't an option, and to reinstall it is a bit of a pain. So some generic rubber hose that's oil resistant will do the job, and it will be routed a little bit differently. I completely forgot to record the lead up to this, but all that happened was a tab got welded on to our bracket, a riv nut inserted, and then we can finally bolt our intercooler in properly. And then all that's left to do is just to cross our fingers and hope this works.
Sounds a little bit offbeat.
Generally, having all of your spark plugs connected would help.
Okay, attempt 2. There we go. That's sounding better.
So some of you may have seen a video where I showed you how you can get turbo flutter out of your Subaru. Because I've just put on a bigger intake and intercooler, obviously I have to go and do it. Draw your gasket on a piece of metal, drill it out, cut it, install it in between your gasket and BPV or blow off valve, whichever you run, and enjoy.